Ladies and gentlemen, Tony Topping has led a remarkable life. From the age of 2 years old, he's had encounters with unusual beings and had unusual experiences. Yeah, Tony Topping has, his experiences through his life has led him to become a researcher into... Can you have some quiet, please, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you very much. Has led him to become a researcher into aliens, extraterrestrials, bright lights in the sky and other things, and also secret government and psychic espionage. He's going to give us a very, very interesting, powerful and passionate talk like he always does now. I hope you enjoy it. It's Tony Topping, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I just apologise. We're on a different version of PowerPoint. Now, this font along here, ladies and gentlemen, is meant to be one of those Terminator, Mario Caso type fonts, but just occasionally it appears that they just blend together, so I do apologise because it's on a different format. Basically, that's me in 2006, and by irony, Mr. Shayler's in the audience who remembers me going there. That was my first talk that I ever gave, and I'm stood there with a piece of paper in my hand. I've not got PowerPoint, and I'm reading off a sheet, and quite frankly, I don't quite know what the hell is going on, other than I've been targeted, and that's me, probably currently with the interaction with the UFOs. I was struggling at that point in 2006 to understand what was going on with me. So I'm basically a contact experiencer. I've had a lot of support from individuals telling me to come out with all this and get to the point. And there are guys who have been at the probe conferences and the other conferences that have seen this talk, but it's an honour really, because they're always giving me feedback, encouraging me, moving onwards, Ben and everyone, and it's great to know. So thank you guys for that. Moving onwards, if I can find the right button, moving onwards, we've got to wonder though, I think we've got to wonder on this journey and where it starts. And you may ask yourself, that's Mr. Tolkien, and that's UFO. Now, that font was meant to be in the Terminator style. Actually, that was meant to be like in a Terminator style font for a specific reason. I'll come back to that in a minute. But that's Mr. Tolkien. Tolkien did The Lord of the Rings, he did The Hobbit, and one of the things that I think a linguistic professor at the University of Washington commented on was the fact that his work actually mirrors a reality. Any good science fiction writer will use components to blend his audience in, to buy into the reality that what they're actually talking about is real. And what is not known about Tolkien is he was a student of the Bock saga, as am I. The Bock saga, I highly recommend it to you. It's in Norse mythology. And the Bock saga is at a time was written, it's meant to have been written when all the world was ice. Atlantis, Atland is, all the world is ice. And it's interesting to note as well that Tolkien developed alien language, alien words, from the orcs to, I can't remember, the Proto-Elven, elves, all that kind of thing. He developed those languages. But what is interesting to note as well is he recognized, and a lot of students of the Bock saga also recognized, that he was possibly a student of the Bock saga, but there is, in his work of fiction, some element of realism, some element of truth as to what is going on. For example, if I went, ah, you'd suddenly, that's actually orc for fire, roughly. But if I did that from his language there, you all suddenly got what I meant. You all suddenly realized something was going on. There was a hidden collective going on. Equally, when we look at this font here, which should be like the Terminator, the classic Terminator font with the ladies trying to save the Earth, the Terminator's gone back in time. Really, that font, should it be correct, should actually mean time. UFOs in time, disclosure through time. And that's what this is all about, the world of disclosure and the world of UFOs and my contact experiences in time. We can see that this is my father. That's me, the little Ewok there. And this is my father in the services, in the forces. It was a very strange relationship with him. It is rumoured that he used to tell me that the KGB approached him. I actually believe that he was targeted. I actually believe that he was targeted by some very dark forces because they targeted me as well and have done for a number of years, and it's been hellish. All for a very good reason. It's just worth it. It's just really worth it to deliver all this to you. But he had the power and the miraculous ability to heal hands. He had the power to save a cat from dying. He brought back my Uncle Bill from a heart attack, much to the shock of the ambulance crew. But he was a cruel man. He abused me. It was an abusive relationship. But we can't help but think that he was targeted. He was targeted by something. And this theme of being targeted as a targeted individual carries on throughout my career as a contact experiencer. For contactees in the United Kingdom of UFOs, there is a threat of motor neuron disease, there is the threat of brain hemorrhaging, there's all kinds of hidden threats out there. One threat in particular I'm going to talk about to you that was esoteric in nature. So our journey goes quite deep, and I'm moving forward. And the fact that my first vision was at the age of 2, it was an elephant vision. And when you hear me on TV or radio talk about this, because I've been on TV and radio, I think one of the biggest occupational hazards in my job is fantasists. People who think that they work for the government. People who think that they work for Mossad or MI6 or the Ministry of Defense. So the list is actually impressive. We've had MI6, we've had somebody claim they work for MI5. I'm going to come to the one to do with German defense intelligence, which was very spooky. And we've had a few other odds and ends going on, including an email from Agency 33 that wanted me to do this and do that, all complete and utter bollocks. But basically what happened was this was my first encounter, and I call it the path of YASMAT. YASMAT is specific, it's Sanskrit, it was given to me by the people in the UFOs, and I'll talk about that in some detail a bit later. But basically, it was a vision of the Lord Ganesha, the Hindu god, the Lord Ganesha, stomping through the wall at age 2. If you can imagine me at age 2 looking at a wall and seeing that going through the wall, not that particularly, but seeing the vision of this elephant god going through a wall, the trumpets blaring, I'm thinking what the bloody hell was going on. I'm screaming at my father. My father's saying, there's nothing wrong, you can't see anything. By this time I'd bit my own tongue, I was bleeding everywhere. Actually, it was a full-on, at age 2, interaction with extraterrestrials that I didn't know about until 40 years later. It set seeds in time, because our theme is about time and UFOs and where we're going as a humanity, as a collective. So we're going to go deeply into it. Really what's going on with close encounters and UFOs is not what's written on the internet. As you can see there, we've got a photo there of something done by Corey Good to do with Nordic extraterrestrials liaise with world leaders over liaise with religious leaders over UFO disclosure. It is not as we think. This UFO disclosure is related to time travel. UFO disclosure works in a way that we would not think in a million years, because ETs are smart. Some of them are downright unethical, but some of them are very smart, very clever, very spiritual. A few years ago at the Probe conference, when they were torturing me, at the height of me being tortured under MK Ultra mind control, when I was getting gunfire, awoken, this, that, and the other. Maybe somebody in the audience will remember, Andrew might remember, and I'm going on and on about what they're doing to me and what they aren't doing to me, and the energy in the room went down. That's because it's a spiritual thing. But at the time when somebody said, Tony, this is spiritual, I didn't understand them. But it is. It is truly spiritual. So the disclosure is not as we think. And then we get this gift from Germany. I call it the German gift because it's a bit of a catalyst, really, when I got this phone call from this German defense guy. But we can definitely say that I have been tortured by mind control. That's a dead ringer for the guy who tortured me. I was under overt surveillance, not just covert surveillance. And what he did is he came into a pub in Selby, where I live, and ordered a drink for himself with his sidekick. As he did that and I walked past him, he said to his sidekick, I see he's going to the toilet again. Just like that. Now, taken in that context, you could also add that to what happened if you had a confidential telephone conversation with somebody. You walk past somebody like him and he mentions the conversation in precise detail. That would be quite shocking for you. So what happened was it got to a level where I was tortured by them. That's a dead ringer for what he looks like. That's actually a dead ringer for what he looks like. And I felt that in years and years ahead that I've actually risen above him so that that bastard reaches for the drinks cabinet every time he hears my name, because that's where it's going. Believe it or not, it started with the UFOs coming in over the roof. It started with communication. It made him do a runner. It's not been easy to engage in a private war with an element of the intelligence services that you don't know of, that are up to no good. And there's also behind the scenes some kind of alien morality Cold War going on, some type of spiritual conflict behind the scenes, which I'll also come to at the very end of the talk. The journey began for me in about 1999 when the UFO started coming in over the house. It prompted mysterious secret police surveillance. I was awoken from gunfire at 3 and 4 in the morning. Another popular thing they would do is wake me at 3 in the morning to tell me how much salary they were all on. It was quite popular to hear alarm clocks getting up for work. It became a nightmare. What they didn't know and set behind the scenes was this lot going on. This is the first one, the first UFO arrival back in 1999. And I'm lucky now to have a producer behind me who helps me with all this. Jason has done an excellent job in just highlighting there. As you can see, that's the UFO. Reason to suspect that that's a drop-a-stone UFO, i.e. a UFO in the vertical position at spin, moving. That's an aircraft. So we can see the kind of the contrast of the UFOs coming in there. And what happened was, in gearing up to this very bizarre interaction with this German guy, and believe me, I've met a few very weird people on my travels, I found this one to be the most spookiest incident of all. In the early days, NATO did an assessment. That's a UFO over Rotherham, by the way. Triangle UFO over Rotherham, similar to the ones that I've interacted with. But the NATO, they did an assessment, and it was about UFOs flying in over Russia and UFOs flying out of Russia over the West. They thought it was going to trigger a nuclear war, and it didn't. We're very lucky because the NATO did an assessment on this and discovered that extraterrestrials had been visiting planet Earth for many a year. In fact, the most poignant remark that was made by the NATO assessment, according to Staff Sergeant Robert Dean, was that they look like us and we look like them, and I can guarantee that that is correct. That did happen. And so bizarrely, with all this going on, I phoned my local council in January 2016 to query my council tax. Lifted up the phone, all of a sudden there's an American woman on the phone going, yeah, okay, thank you, as if she suddenly realised I was on the line. Dials the number to my local council. All of a sudden, German guy on the other end of the phone, speaking fluent German at me, and I thought it very odd. It's not odd in terms of mind control when you think out of the box. It's not odd at all that there's a possibility that they were measuring signature clusters for my brain in terms of mind control. They could have been doing measurement signals analysis, although it looks like a phone call to the wrong number. It's very interesting to note that during this time, I also got that phone call as well from this guy here. What happened was, after the phone call from Germany, I got a call also in the pub from a French number. It is interesting because the nature of the targeting that I experienced is of an esoteric cabal. You could call them Illuminati, you could call them the demonic, it doesn't really matter. But I'd been targeted by a number of years by them, and the phone rang in the pub from France. On the end of that phone, I picked it up, and on the end of that phone there's a guy going, "Hello, darling, have you seen Pam?" Just like that, in a Cockney accent. Actually, he's doing signature measurement analysis. He's measuring clusters, I'm sure of it. And I just went, "No, mate, nobody of that word here." Ba-bum, put the phone down. But it's interesting that in the phone number there, 54633, which is the number, and I'm blatant about this, 4633 refers to Genesis. I can't remember it verbatim, but Genesis 46:33 refers to when the Pharaoh calls, you will tell him your occupation. So the Pharaoh called me. Actually, the Pharaoh is out of his depth with me. But that's what it's about. In terms of esoteric, there's always some type of esoteric tone, flavour to the harassment that actually goes on. And if we look here, so that's the image showing the drawing of my talk. What happened was, I went to the UFO Academy in Watford and I gave this talk. And what I said was that these UFOs here, with the clocks there, they came to me, they were delivered to me as a symbolic vision. It was delivered to me by what were known as Nordic extraterrestrials. They are blonde, blue-eyed individuals, and they came through the dreamscape as I was sleeping, and they spoke to somebody, a mysterious, shall we say, third party. The clocks say 11:45 and one says midnight. It's the midnight one that the Nordic guy was interested in, and this excellent work is done by Lloyd Canning, who brought this image to life. And I've got to say, and Lloyd's selling his art, isn't he, today? I've got to say he's got the clocks absolutely bang on. That's exactly what the clocks look like. And it happened, possibly it was going to happen, it's a vision, but they were going to turn up in this field here. The thing is that it is related to biblical proportions of the second coming. The vision is related to nuclear war and a third world conflict. At the time that was taken, it was Ukraine. The height of the situation in Ukraine is what was going on there. And what you've got here is military activity very active just recently and over the last 2 years in this area of the field here. But it was my talk that triggered the call from the German secret police, allegedly. So I'm sat there after my talk at Watford. A few days later, private number rings, picks up the phone, hello. Yes, my name is Klaus. I represent the German Security of the Interior, Defense of the Constitution of Germany, blah, blah, blah. We're in a cafe in Frankfurt. Look us up, he said, by hilarious irony. So I asked him what he wanted. And he said, well, Mr. Topping, the Cold War is over. We're all friends now. He's lying. I just want to know this, and I want to know that, and I want to know about the interior of your UFO craft that you witness. And I want to know all the stuff that you don't talk about regarding your UFO interactions, as if I'm going to tell him. So it ended up with me saying, no, thank you. I don't want to talk to you. And I found it very utterly disrespectful, frankly, that he phoned me like he did with a private number. And then it happened again a week later, Sunday night, 10 o'clock, mobile phone goes, private number, German guy on the end of it. I put the phone down on him. He was panicked, however. He was very panicked indeed over the fact that I'd talked during my talk of the fact that these craft, which I'll come to later, possess artificial intelligence, the like of which humanity doesn't appear to have in its possession. Allegedly. So he was very panicked about all that. And equally, I think it's connected to this as well. So you've got the vision of the kind of the second coming and the biblical goings on and conflict. And then you've got this happening in Germany as well. I recommend the book to you, Vance A. Davis, The Gulf Breeze 6. The Gulf Breeze 6 were an intelligence outfit connected to the US Army, the National Security Agency, based in Germany. 6 of these guys went absent without leave and went to Gulf Breeze in Florida to film UFOs, claiming that the second coming was about to happen and that there was going to be conflict and war. And so you can see, and that's what this guy on the phone from Germany was panicking about. He seemed very agitated about it. And out of all the calls that I've met and all the fantasists I've met, that was the most spookiest. It was quite spooky. And if you look at Germany again, here's another, just an interesting thing. This is Maria OSRIC. It is claimed she was part of the Vril Society. And it is interesting to note that, was it the Fool Society or the Vril Society? Fool, yes, that's it. She was part of the Fool Society. She grew her hair long in order to communicate with extraterrestrials. As we will see, communication with extraterrestrials, however, doesn't go on in the way that you think it would, and it certainly doesn't happen with long hair. But allegedly she channeled this piece, and the Nazi regime were highly delighted that she could channel extraterrestrials from Aldebaran. And what happened was this was sent to a university in Germany. It's a Vril 7, I think. Sent to the university in Germany. The engineering guy there said, this is amazing. This is amazing stuff. We need to put this into operation. We need to see if we can get this flying. She disappeared mysteriously, but we can see that this guy rings me up and says, oh, Tony, I'm from Germany. We're all friends now. There's nothing really to hide. I just wondered about UFOs. Can you tell me? When you've got all that going on behind the scenes, it's quite clear that something had panicked him. It's quite clear from the conversation I had with him that I was a new kid on the block as far as they were concerned, and they didn't know who I was. And as we can see as well, we've got plasma UFOs, a whole new science. That's a typical plasma UFO, flying in over Berwick just as I'm about to give a talk. My friend Jason had a look at that as I put up on the photo, hey everyone, I'm at Berwick, isn't it nice? He said, what's that, Tony? And we looked at it, and there it was. It's a plasma-type UFO. And it really kind of like gives a whole area of suppressed science that we have not seen before. Plasma phenomenon was researched by the MOD under Project Condign. And there's also findings from NASA regarding plasma planets, a whole area of life, according to reports from an Indian think tank on UFOs, which was dumped in the India Daily Press. They started spewing out all this information. They said that, as a matter of interest, they said that one of these things, that they could detect plasma-like beings, and that when they entered rooms, they could give minor sonic booms, these plasma beings. It's quite crazy, I have to say, but I've had interaction with them as well. And it was very pleasant. Quite crazy, I know, because I'm not so much crazy, that's not the word we're looking for, and that's the wrong word. Flabbergasting, wondering, that's probably the word. And this takes us, the plasma findings take us to Project HESSDALEN in Norway. where they filmed a series of strange lights over this village and over this area, and the findings of it are very interesting, because not only did they do that, they found that 5% of these things were UFOs. 5% were UFOs under some kind of intelligent contract. And what happened was, I recently appeared, or last Friday night it was, on the BBC One show, and when they came to film me at Watford, there was a little bit of an argument with them over the fact that they were going to omit these findings by this guy here who was at HESSDALEN. The conclusion was 95% of thermal plasma. And it would suggest, he says, a higher dimension is at work in the forming of these plasma-type UFOs. But the one show, I said, look, we need to put this guy's findings in. They said, no, we don't want to do that. Equally, when I was at Chesterfield, Dr. David Clark wandered through the door. Everybody at the Chesterfield group I was giving a talk at said, oh, look, it's Dr. Dave. What the hell's he doing here? And I kind of said hello to him. I went to shook his hand, but he refused to shake mine, which is all fair enough. But it's interesting to note that when I started talking about the UFO that came over my house and illuminated a television antenna, and we had it under analysis, and they said that the conclusion was it was a UFO. And when I said that the helicopter that filmed me was an unmarked helicopter, and Jane's Defence Weekly confirmed it as an AS555, not on use to British forces, he didn't write any of that down. However, anything that could be interpreted as a bit freaky, as a bit kind of, well, not really, it could be this, it could be that, his pen was going like this. I'm not interested in his opinion, actually, but what I'm trying to highlight to you is that there is an agenda, definitely an agenda, to keep this out the news. And as we've seen the previous speaker say regarding Disney, it is about consciousness and the manipulation of consciousness. And I came in collision with it about 3 years ago. So, let me get this right. So yeah, the findings showed also, which I found very interesting, that if they are intelligent, who is behind it? And also, of course, lights dim when a plane's near. And they do show intelligence. But none of these findings they wanted publishing. They didn't want to give it credence, you see. And also, as well, we discovered that the same type of lights from HESSDALEN showed making crop circles in Alton Barnes, Wiltshire. There was a situation that went on in Alton Barnes where I think they actually filmed one of these dots of light forming a crop circle, and there's a link between the two. There's a correlation between the two. But that information they didn't want in. And so what happens is that also during the course of my experiences, I developed strange abilities. I think the abilities come from my father in some very strange way. I never say that I have these abilities, and I never even say to people, believe what I say, I know the gospel truth, because it doesn't work like that in real life. And I think when you get to that level of, I know it all, I'm going to set up the tent in the garden, we're going to do the landing strip, they're coming in. When you get to that level of narcissism, I think that's a dangerous thing, because you've got to always, in this game, check your own level of narcissism, check your own level of kind of thinking of attention, what you're in it for, who you're speaking for, all these dynamics you have to think about. And you have to work on your own psychology, because you can have these spectacular experiences, but if you forget at a spiritual level what is going on around you, then you can be in big trouble with it. There's an ancient tradition from Atlantis called the Toltec tradition, not to be confused with the tradition of Carlos Castaneda, who wrote similar books. This is the actual Toltec tradition from Atlantis, under a guy called Tayun Maris. And he wrote in his publication, one of his first publication, I've forgotten the name of it, but basically he indicated that in the Toltec tradition there are two paths. The path of high adventure, crazy goings on, UFOs coming in, spectacular experiences, and the path of low adventure, Master Yoda stirring his cooking pot in Star Wars, that kind of thing, the two paths. But anyway, there is this other thing as well that I wanted to talk about called 8 ability, because it leads you somewhere, it led me into something. Totally, it's about the application of power, the misdirection of power. You as an individual not understanding your own power, you're going to run into something as you journey along in all this, as I did. You're going to on the path of high adventure. So it's the ability, 8 ability is coined by the American remote viewing and espionage people, as the ability to do something that gives spectacular results, thereby giving 8 martinis or 8 ability. They had to have 8 martinis lined up because they were that shocked at the abilities of what they could do to manipulate events using remote viewing and using remote influencing. There was, from the remote viewing point, I think it was Project Stargate, and if you're interested from the remote influencing viewpoint, it was Dragoon Absorb, a program called Dragoon Absorb that hardly anybody knows anything about. But the Americans knew it as 8 ability. The Russians knew it as the ability to influence events at planetary level. The Russians had a very good write-up about their something called walk-in mind operations, where they actually walk into somebody's mind. They did it on Madeleine Albright. And what they did is they discovered some very revealing data about America's attempted mineral grab on Russia, etc., etc. If you've got a pen and paper, I do recommend the site New Cosmology, which is the Russian remote viewing website that, fascinatingly enough, admits that the CIA funded them. Can you believe that the CIA funded the Russian remote viewing program? Well, they did to so many million. Kept very hush, very quiet. As we can see, this is Lord Krishna, that is Lord Ganesha. This is the kind of like the Hindu consciousness moving through time and space and incarnations, as opposed to, as we can see, as the previous speaker said, it's all about energy, it's all about consciousness, and my God, it is. As we can see there, the pentagram of Syria, that's actually a vortex area drawn in that shape specifically. And of course, what happened is that I had this bizarre ability to influence things. It came from my father when he could make somebody fall off a ladder. I remember a family member was in trouble many years ago, and she was in real bother. And so it was with the firm that she worked with who framed her. And so my father sat in the living room, I'll never forget it, closed his eyes and said, "I hope the place goes up in flames." He closed his eyes in the living room. The boiler room went up in the place where she worked. There was nobody in it. It was an empty building, but it went up all right. He blew the boiler room up. At least I think he did. So what happened was there's this ability to influence events. You will be tracked. If you have this ability, you will be tracked by very mysterious forces. And so the ability to influence conflict and war is something that this force that controls higher consciousness does not want. It wants fear. It wants us to be in conflict with each other as we move on a path of transcendence. So what happens is that this force here, which I call the YASMAT, the YASMATIC force of Ganesha, or whatever you want to call it, collides with, I'll call it Satan, collides with the forces of Satan, the forces of the demonic. And what happened was with this, let me just go back, ladies and gents, what happened was with this is that it knew, did this force, we'll call it a force. It's important that we don't give it energy. But it came knocking at my door when I was asleep. It knew that of my capabilities, not that I'm saying I have them, but it seemed to know that I had capabilities. Bizarre, I know. It said to me that if I influence a situation, a world event situation with my capability, it will blow my brains out, it will hemorrhage my brain, and it made no doubt about it. And it declared itself as the supreme satanic entity upon earth, and it had the stench of centuries about it. It was like something out the Lord of the Rings, where those horsemen are stalking the Hobbit. And the thing was, it was similar to looking at something like Agent Smith, who wanted out of the Matrix, but it wasn't telling anyone. But the thing is that some extraterrestrials have actually commented, which I'll come to later, you have to respect something like that. You have to respect something like that. And so I just bowed in respect and said, thank you very much, and on its way it went, and I'm still sat here. But you have to treat it with respect because you don't know what you're dealing with. And not only that, you don't know whether the forces that are protecting you have their own agendas. You're not sure. It was a very real situation. I'm lucky to be alive, very lucky indeed to be alive. And of course, when we look at this, we look at the Collins elite. This was a specialist agency. A very specialist agency who believed that UFOs formed a demonic component, and how right they were. It was formed separately from Majestic 12. And actually, ladies and gentlemen, if you're going to invade a planet, if you're actually going to invade a humanity, you don't go down the high street with your laser guns ablazing in UFOs. You take over the collective consciousness. You manipulate world affairs. You manipulate world leaders when they are asleep, and so on and so forth. And so the manipulation of nations does go on. Interesting, ladies and gentlemen, that aircraft there is a Starfire. Starfire, 12 rockets it fires. It was during the UFO air war of 1950 that these things were deployed against UFOs, because this agency was baffled as to why UFOs were coming in through space-time. They actually believed, and they were right on the money as well, this agency believed that it was caused, one element of what they were dealing with was caused by occult ritual. You only need to look on the internet today, or the previous speaker with his Disney stuff, to know that that consciousness is quite trucking along behind the scenes, and they believe that, the Collins elite actually believed that ritual and what was going on behind the scenes was causing UFOs to come in and attack their aircraft. It's called Frank Fascino, Shoot Them Down, the UFO Air War of 1950. It's a very interesting read. And also there was some further conclusions. I highly recommend this book to you by a guy called ALEC NEWALD. He's a friend of mine. He went down to New Zealand. He was driving along in Auckland, and I think in the 90s he disappeared for 10 days. Actually, the other night I was sat on my computer. I disappeared for half an hour and don't know where I went. But that's it. And I was put back in the room again, and that can happen with them. But basically, these guys, in the aliens who were in co-evolution, he's driving down the road. He thinks he's had a car accident. He sees what looks like ghosts walking towards him. He thinks that he's dead. In fact, they're aliens from another dimension. And what he was basically told was that the time that they've mastered time travel, they are kind of a version of us from the future, but they're in another dimension. But not only that, the most profound remark that this ET made called Xena was, the earth is ruled by a dark force. It is a form of life. It should be respected, and how right she was. And we can see that their UFOs actually are like plasma shaped as well, and also there is a reverse side to them. When they're in another dimension, it's not quite antimatter, but it's like the reverse cycle of matter. It's very technical, and we are taught in the New Age kind of spiritual thinking that we have a soul. Well, according to the aliens, not only do we have a soul, but we have a reverse side to us. I've seen that, where you have a reverse side to you. And if you're dealing with parallel universes, you can have parallel you waving back at you. And not only that, we talk of reincarnation, when in fact you can have future reincarnation as you looking back at you. These are the dynamics that contact experiencers have to deal with and are not told until it happens to them, you see. That's the thing. But you see, what we're getting is this constant theme, this constant theme coming at us by them. When the UFOs started flying in over the house, of all manner of extraterrestrials. It happened about 4 years ago, when they declared their hand as to what they look like, which is truly spectacular. But here we see this constant theme, a theme of science, a theme of aerodynamics, the theme of spirituality, all being communicated in the skies above. And here's one here. This, as we can see, is the triangular craft. It's flying along. A UFO comes in from the left. It flies over the triangle, rotates itself round, and flies off at speed, demonstrating, not only demonstrating, but asking to be listened to, asking to be heard. Let's just see if this plays, ladies and gents, this clip of it. So it's gone under analysis. Excuse the spelling. So that's the object there. Triangular shaped craft. Started in 99. Here it's coming in now, flying along. We believe that to actually be an aircraft under normal strobe sequence, but it's what happens next that's very interesting. There we go, as we can see. How are we for time? Do we know, Ben? There we go. The small object comes in from the left. The triangle-shaped craft is there. Here we go now. There it comes. And it does the most remarkable rotation and flies off at speed to its right. So it's showing a maneuverability that we don't possess. There's no aircraft I know that could actually do that, ladies and gentlemen. No aircraft I know that could actually do that. And here's another one there. And so we see also as well from them the theme of communication. That on the left is actually the UFO coming in 1999 when I first began all this. Didn't have a clue what I was doing, put something up on the internet thinking that I knew it all, and got followed, got strange phone calls, got the mind control treatment. That's the UFO coming in there, illuminating the TV antenna. A few years later, I think about last year, that's the UFO again, same type of UFO, plasma type UFO. It changes its shape, morphs itself, flies through my ham radio antenna and flies right out the other side of it, demonstrating a morphing technology that we also do not possess. So what they're doing is they are doing theme of communication with antenna, aerodynamics. They're wanting to establish communication. They're wanting to establish communication, I think, with we, the government of the people, if there is such a thing, because the shadow government are certainly not going to disclose anything, I think, to us at the moment. This is the actual thing that happened with the radio antenna. And what I want to do is I want to have this analysed for a TV documentary to see if the metal has been altered, if its structure has been altered in any way, shape or form. I think that's working, ladies and gents. Yeah, I've got it. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, this is it. Excuse my spelling. Here we go, yeah. So what it does, it's going to fly along, and it's actually going to morph itself through the antenna. So that's my ham radio antenna, the steel bit there. Here comes the UFO, the object. It's either a plasma type UFO or it's a triangle craft, but what it will suddenly do now is it will suddenly just fly directly through it, or give the impression that it's flying through it, as you can see there, and out again. There's another object just passing. This activity, there's a lot of military activity as well over my house, a lot of military activity with the Air Force, basically just wanting to know what's, I think they just come along to see what's happening. This, of course, is this. It also is showing a presence in the skies above. This is actually a UAV. There's been a big argument about it. They're saying it, people are saying it's a passenger jet. It's not a passenger jet. This is a UAV. It's an unmanned aerial vehicle. Over the summer of last year, it came in over my house, probably on reconnaissance, to see what was going on. What happened is that UFO up there literally photobombed it. Literally photobombed it at tremendous speed, at a speed that we couldn't keep up with. We couldn't even slow it down. We just caught that glimpse of it there at tremendous speed. So it's showing this constant theme all the time. There we go again. That's the elongated object in the frame capture, and the UAV is nearby. So it's obviously whoever it is either A, telling them to back off me, or C, demonstrating ability, superior technological ability. From what I understand from my contact experiences with them, their technology base is about 800 years ahead. There's all kinds of crazy stuff on the internet, but 800 years ahead is what they're telling me. That's a torpedo UFO that was also seen, not taken by me, but it was also seen in the area as well, all over the UK. So it's a mystery as to what that is. So basically what we're looking at, ladies and gentlemen, is a situation with UFOs that happen not in the way that they tell you, and not in the way SETI would tell you, because what happens is that communication with UFOs happens in a space-time continuum environment. That causes all kinds of problems for a contact experiencer like myself, and for other contact experiencers, because you are seen and heard in time. You definitely are, and it can cause all kinds of problems from what I would term the up signal line. I do this, some of you are familiar with this, but for those of you who aren't, if I could just have maybe 2 volunteers just to come on stage for me, please, if that's in order. Is there 2 volunteers I could just have up here? Anybody? Any takers? 2 volunteers?
I'll do it again.
Yeah, do it again, Ben, yeah, somebody. Anybody else? Anyone? Thanks, lads. It's just to demonstrate something, yeah. So if you, yeah, that's okay. So let's have a look. I can't remember what the bloody hell it was, frankly, Ben. But yeah, you were future last time, weren't you? Anyway, it's just to demonstrate. I know for those of you who've seen this before, and I thank you for your support. This is for those of you who haven't seen this before. It's a model of a space-time continuum. It's a model of how UFOs communicate. It's actually the pathway to disclosure. It's the pathway to UFO disclosure, and this is what happens. We're told on the internet and online that governments are disclosing. They're not disclosing anything because UFO information is controlled by a shadow government out of the United States. So the government of we the people are not going to get any of this. However, it kind of like happens that people get lucky. And this is what happens. I'm talking about something earlier called the YASMATIC paradox, or YASMAT. It is Sanskrit. It means causal nature of. It is actually related as well to the German royal bloodlines by irony. But it's the UFOs that communicated with me and said, Tony, you are YASMAT. What they did is they did this spectacular vision of building a bridge to me. They walked across this bridge. It was like something out of a science fiction film and just went YASMAT and then disappeared. And you're thinking to yourself, what the bloody hell's all that about? So I had to go on the internet and have a look. And this is what they're talking about. If you can imagine, YASMAT is the causal nature. So this means that you in the audience, me here, we cause a signal in time. This work is not yet technically being looked at, but in a space-time continuum, it has been looked at. We set the precedent. We set what's going on now in this time frame in 2017. And if you can imagine Ben is in the year 2125, and in fact, the up signal line in the space-time continuum in humanity's future can go right up, and I mean right up to about 2000. It can go right up. If you can imagine, this individual is a Nordic ET, blonde, blue-eyed, as so famed, and I'm here. I'm in the year 2017, and what happens is information starts to flow. This guy in 21 whatever sees this information now on the internet, back in his current time frame. He looks online, for example. He sees this information, and he starts looking into it and looking into it. I have caused it. What I've done, YASMAT. I've caused a YASMATIC paradox in time. He now wants to have a look. He knows about the space-time continuum. And then what happens is he communicates with this guy here, the Nordics, who are familiar with this, because it takes about 100 years for humanity to grasp their science and their understanding and their spirituality. So a relation starts between them, an information relation within the space-time continuum. You won't read that on the internet. You won't read that anywhere because it's hidden from you. But that is basically what is going on, and that's basically how disclosure can happen. And that's the agency, 21, 2030, something like that got lucky. And for me, it was a spectacular incident that happened to me where I was awoken from sleep with a guy wearing a headset. And he was wearing a Navy uniform. You can't make this up. And he was just observing me in what I can only describe as a glass bubble. Just observing what I was doing, because it's the paradox of YASMAT. What we cause now has ripples in the future, and it has liaison. So therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I've started at the beginning to tell you that I was a victim of MK Ultra experimentation, but yet I'm now telling you that something is going on of information exchange with the UFOs, and I hope for those of you who first saw me in the early years when I first started, you can see how far we've come. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Cheers. Thank you. Give them a clap. So what's happening is that we've got, for example, the Russians have also had similar incidents using remote viewing and using a system called METACONTACT. The Russians had contact with ETs under a guy called Alexei Savin, who was head of Russia's remote viewing unit, Troop 10,003. He indicated to Pravda, because no other general in the UK would go to the media with this, he indicated to Pravda that his team did remote viewing and contacted an extraterrestrial race. The communication was medical research only. They did not give anything to do with military. And also, as well, there are other nations involved in contact within the space-time continuum. And you will get hammered. If you're in a continuum environment, you will get psychically and esoterically hammered. Time, the nature of liaison within that continuum works very differently to what you've ever taught. And it's can be a curse. But equally, the curse outweighs the rewards. And it was quite an incident for me that happened with all that. So he was called Alexei Savin. He communicated with the extraterrestrials. They gave medical research information only. And so we can see this continual incident in the continuum and disclosure going on with extraterrestrial races. The disclosure, therefore, that's the mainstream consensus version of disclosure. That's on the internet now, done by a bloke called Corey Good, who claims contact with Nordics. But hang on a minute, I've got contact with Nordics. Am I lying? But hang on a minute, Corey's got contacts with Nordics. Is he lying? Oh, no, Alex Collar, he's got contact with Nordics. So the thing is, ladies and gentlemen, is that you've got to really look deeply and really discern as to what is going on. I would recommend that if anybody says that they've got contact with Nordics and from Andromeda, the Andromeda galaxy is where they herald from, then you might want to go and choose that line of research. Equally, there are quite a few people in Sweden who've got some very good research and claim contact with Nordic aliens from Andromeda. But when you go on the internet, Nordics are from here, Nordics are from there. Well, they're not. They're from Andromeda. They're tall, they're blonde, they're blue-eyed. They come in many variants, as they said to me. In some cases, it is acknowledged by Chinese academia that Nordics were in China. Some of the pyramids in China are attributed to Nordics. It's interesting that the Nordic extraterrestrials are present for many reasons. And as we can see there, that's a typical incident within the space-time continuum. And what happened was, that was a vision sent to me from up the signal line. Inside, it's like science fiction, isn't it? But this is real life. You couldn't make it up. I couldn't actually make this up. I'm not equipped to make it up. This is based on real happenings. And what we can see is Ben, the guy from the future, is being taken up by a UFO because they're sharing scientific information. According to what happened to me during this spectacular incident, that was done by illustrator Neil Geddes Ward. It's meant to be an incident that happens in San Francisco about 125 years from now. I don't know whether that's correct because it's not happened yet, but what I'm giving you is a demonstration of information disclosure within a space-time continuum environment. That's what I'm talking about to you. And that's typical of one of the ETs that I've actually seen. That was drawn by a police officer in Dallas in 1970, and she plays a key part and has done for a number of years in my experiences. There's also as well the troubling, unethical questions of the information that they've shown me. Stuff related to nuclear and stuff related to nuclear conflict I've omitted because people panic by it, and not only that, I don't want to get the energy down in the room. I find talking about such subjects is not comfortable for me. And I've seen those visions as well, and obviously that there's a liaison going on that breaks through the secrecy barrier. At the moment, the UFO information is controlled. It's controlled by the origins of which in the Third Reich at the end of World War II. The origins of the UFO cover-up are in that. And at the moment, the barriers are being broken by these extraterrestrials in the UFOs to reveal more information. And as we can see, I think that's a very nice, accurate diagram, really, of what is going on. So what we've got is our timeline running, as we can see, going down there. We've got the major signature point, which I showed you. Those three men stood here, me, Ben, and the other, I didn't get the other gentleman's name, when I demonstrated that. That's actually what we're demonstrating, that major signature in time. You've got other extraterrestrial groups around, and we all are seeing each other. And also, not only that, it's causing a paradox in time where events could be altered in the future as well. We know that, I know from my experiences that an Earth agency understood this work and a liaison went on. We can see that the events on Earth, it does cause a signal in time. And I thought that diagram just summed it up very nicely there as to what we're talking about. You can see, I'm sure you'd agree with me, ladies and gentlemen, that what you're reading on the internet about UFOs and disclosure isn't quite as it appears. It's more technical and more cleverer and more smarter than that, really. Contactees, then, I'm a contact experiencer, and you've time-traveled. If you're dealing, for example, with aliens in another dimension, you've crossed into their world, they're forward in time from us, and then you're put back again into this reality. You've therefore time-traveled. You've also got exposure to parallel universes and human beings, and you've got this strange feeling of time displacement where 2017 feels like you're in the 1940s. It's the most bizarre feeling because you've been exposed to a time continuum. You've been exposed to contact with extraterrestrials in a way that isn't written about in the mainstream, you see. That's the situation. For example, here's one as well, an advanced heating science. This happened to an abductee in Brazil, allegedly taken by Nordics, and as we can see, this is the fiber of his cotton sheets. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, what happened was he was abducted. There's an imprint of him on the bed sheet. One bed sheet is kind of like his imprint further forward, because they've lifted him up and taken him forward. So what we've got is this heating element of the fibers of the cotton, where they've shown this precise heating technology. One fiber exposed to extreme temperature, the other fiber cool, exposed to no temperature change at all and untouched. Technically speaking, it all should be scarred, but it isn't. The fibers are being exposed to precise temperature-controlled heating to demonstrate something, I do believe. I remember I am a carer for my mother, bless her. She's got dementia, she's got other issues, and it can be very tough. I have a very tough life. Having to deal with all this as well is not easy. And we had this incident happen to me where on Christmas of last year, I went down with fever. The room was spinning. I couldn't look after my mother. I said, Mother, I've got to go upstairs. It's just no good. I'm ill. I'm going to have to rest myself. I remember developing this fever. I remember going delirious and chatting to myself in sleep. The room's spinning. And then next minute I know there was this bizarre knock at the door, as if in a dream. I goes down the stairs in this dream. I open the door to discover this gentleman here, Nordic. There's actually a photo of a Nordic taken in somebody's back garden in, I think, Amsterdam, which I couldn't locate. I'd lost the photo, but it's an actual photo and a very good one it is. But basically, that's him. He had a flash in the flashing signature rank there. He said hello to me. Next minute, I know there's this familiar wah-wah sound of engines as if I'm being taken away somewhere. And he took me here to the RIBBLEHEAD viaduct. And he looked up at that structure with me in this giant dream and said, that's a very magnificent structure, Tony, that really is. And next minute I know I was placed back in time again, placed back in the room, and about 3 hours later I was feeling well. I could look after my mother, and I was well again the day before. Because what they are objecting to, these things coming in over my house, they're objecting to the fact that I'm being subjected to certain mind control goings on. And they have serious objections, serious moral and ethical objections. At the end of this talk, I'll point out something else to you about that as well. And of course, there was these kind of ships that they have, the Nordics, the triangle craft. They have advanced artificial intelligence capability. It's something I deeply want to get into, but I haven't got time in this lecture to do it. But needless to say, I'll just say that in the course of my experiences, we're being shown something. We're being shown science, spiritual understanding, diversion from war. We're being shown all kinds of things. And when you speak to a machine that is intelligent, it's quite shocking that you're actually speaking to a machine that has its own voice and its own mind is absolutely out of this world, really. And that's what happened to me with the craft. The craft integrated with me, integrated in what I was thinking. They use it, from what I'm told, for data analysis. But even as I sit here speaking to you, I want more. I want to tell you more. What I've just said, okay, that's good, but we want more, don't we? We need to get more. We need to get more information out there about what this is all about. What is their artificial intelligence all about? Because as a contact experiencer, and what I object to, and those who've had contact with UFOs may also object to, is the vagary. It's all very vague. The information is drip, 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 and it can get very annoying and very agitating. I communicate that to you to show you the kind of the cost of what is going on for somebody who has contact with UFOs in the UK. There's a real price to it, a real cost. A few weeks later, that appeared near the RIBBLEHEAD viaduct. I don't know whether it's a weather anomaly. I'd like to think that it was them signalling, saying that we're here. Our government know that the Nordics are flying in the skies above Britain. Our Air Force is also aware of it. They are aware. They're not daft. They know that this is actually going on, but there's a high-level cover-up. There was also an incident in Southport where it kind of like indicated, these UFOs indicated that they were from a higher dimension. That was after being exposed to some MK Ultra mind control that with images of depravity, real nasty images of depravity projected at me by whatever force is controlling the show. And so they came in over Southport in a UFO. I wondered what it was doing. It was 4 in the morning. I'd been woken up from horrific MK Ultra style goings on. And I thought, what the bloody hell does that want? I went back to bed again to be subjected to this magnificent vision, this Jacob Ladder's vision, the UFO from a higher dimension coming in, signaling once again the theme, United Kingdom, the theme, our government, the theme, science, understanding, this constant thing, and I want more. I'm trying to get to the bottom of why this is going on, and it appears to be for some very deep reasons. And this, of course, is I'd just like to play you this video clip. This happened last week, round about 6 o'clock in the morning, I think, when I was heading to the paper shop, of all places. Let's just see if this plays for you. Got it, right. Okay, we're on it, kid. So this is what happened to me. With me being a carer as I am, there's been some very serious ethical and moral objections raised as to all that has gone on with the situation with me. I think in a lecture of this time span that we have, I can't fit it all in, but that's the UFO. It comes in near my local post office, near my local Londis, 6:10 in the morning, and it's going through cloud, as we can see, Jason has once again done an excellent job there of analysis. Check his site out, UFO Only on Facebook. He's been a great help to me. I'm lucky to have such support. And that's his drawing there of it. It's flying in. It's connected to an incident that happened. As I've said to you, there was an incident where I said at the start of the lecture that contact experiences within the UK are on dangerous ground with all this, because we have a threat of motor neuron disease going on. We could possibly contract motor neuron disease because we get battered. The neurons may be damaged. We might not fire up correctly, and this is a concern. And so what happened is this lady alien who's been around me for a number of years did something to assist with that. I can't even begin to describe what she did, but it was quite an amazing experience. And equally, I was laughing about this with Mena earlier, in that I was sat in the living room having a cup of tea on the same day. I think this was taken round about midday. Just sat in the living room having a cup of tea with my shirt off. Ladies, control yourself. And what happened was, I'm sat there having this cup of tea, and next minute I know I hear this voice say, "May I touch you?" outside of me, and she ran a finger just down me like that. Now, as Mena jokingly pointed out, pervert, she said, "What a pervert alien." And I thought, well, yeah. But the point being is that they don't do anything by half measure. There is a specific educational reason why they did that. It will escalate. It will move forward to a full-blown kind of contact situation. So if I'm here this time next year, I may be able to explain to you the full-on situation with them. At the moment, what they've said to me is that there was an incident that also happened with her where they did it too full-on, and I felt my blood pressure coming up. I take blood pressure tablets because of it, and they actually said, "Listen, this is not safe, we're going to have to get out of the way, we've made a mistake here." So these extraterrestrials can make mistakes. They can. And what we're saying is that there has been with her glimpses of them. They're akin to tall whites, as by Charles Hall. I recommend his book. They're akin to the tall whites. And they have twice now done direct medical intervention on me to stop me from falling ill. One was to prevent, as I say, a motor neuron incident from happening. There's been incidents with them in Formby and Yorkshire, and they're quite morally outraged over the fact that I have to put up with this while I'm looking after, in her quotes, my dear loved one, i.e. my mother. I'm a carer for her. They're pretty pissed off about it, that I'm having to put up with this. And so I have to just thank them for being around and helping me, because believe me, ladies and gentlemen, I'm being exposed to hell. Sheer hell with it all, because it is to do with consciousness. It is to do with the human race evolving into something else. It is to do with our consciousness being controlled. 2 global conflicts are not by coincidence. Human beings killing each other in the trenches. Human beings bombing cities. All right, there's a human situation around that, human affairs, but beyond that, if you look closely, there's something else at work. There's like the goalposts, the ball hitting the net. We don't see the football hit the net, but we see the net move, and that's really what it's about. And I'd just like to maybe just end my talk with this. This is a flash badge. What happens in northwest of Las Vegas stays there. I'd be very concerned, and I was very concerned about seeing that, because one of the ethical and morally repugnant issues is regarding the abduction of cattle, the abduction of humanity and human beings, and the ETs, the Nordics and so on, the people who are involved in this know that this is going on, and really, as human beings, we should be very concerned over an alien with a shush like that, and what happens 84 stays there. That's very troubling, because the US shadow government, under Eisenhower in the 1950s, when somebody turned up on their doorstep and said, "All right, geezer, do you want to buy this UFO? It can travel anywhere in the universe. Just look the other way, son, while we just abduct your people and cattle, and you'll be all right, mate. You just let us get on with it. You have the UFO." That's where it all went wrong. That is where it all went wrong, ladies and gentlemen. So I hope I've given you a glimpse and an experience into what it's like as a UFO contact experiencer living in the UK. I hope if I'm allowed to return next year that I'll be able to give you even more information. And in the months ahead, those of you who constantly support me and you turn up and see my lectures, it's good of you, thank you. I think some of the guys in here have seen this lecture 3 times now, they've seen this. And it's good of them to have their support as well. And I'd just like to thank you very much. If you've got any questions, I've got a bit of time to answer them, have we?
Yeah, you've got 5 minutes, Tony.
5 minutes. Anybody's got a question, I'm more than happy to answer. No, thank you very much indeed.